There is a strange kind of death that only happens in the car industry. It is not a company dying because it built something bad. It is a company dying because it built something too good. Something so far ahead, so obsessively engineered, so expensive to make right, that the very brilliance of the car became the weapon that killed the brand behind it. That sentence sounds impossible. How can excellence be fatal? How can the best version of something be the reason it disappears? But it happened, again and again, in American and European automotive history, and almost nobody talks about it today. Today we are going through 8 cars that were built with no compromise, no shortcuts, and no regard for what it would cost the company to make them right. And every single one of them helped bury the very brand that created them. Stay until the end, because the last 2 on this list are the most brutal examples of this pattern in the entire history of the automobile, and one of them still shows up in movies today without most people ever knowing the true story behind it. 1. The Duesenberg Model J. In the late 1920s, a small Indianapolis manufacturer named Duesenberg decided it was not going to build a good car. It was going to build the best car in the world, full stop, no exceptions. The Model J arrived in 1928 with a straight 8 engine producing 265 horsepower, at a time when most luxury cars struggled to hit half of that number. Top speed reached almost 120 miles an hour, which for 1928 sounds less like a car and more like a rumor. Duesenberg did not build complete cars either. It built rolling chassis engineering masterpieces on wheels, and then shipped them off to the finest coach builders in the world, names like Murphy, LeBaron, and Bowman and Schwartz, so that each customer's car could be a completely unique, hand-built work of art. A finished Model J could cost between $13,000 and $20,000, at a time when a brand new Ford cost around $500. Think about that gap for a second. You could buy nearly 30 Fords for the price of one Duesenberg. The company's own advertising leaned into this obsession, using the phrase, "It's a Duesenberg," as shorthand for anything that represented the absolute peak of quality. Clark Gable owned one. Gary Cooper owned one. Even Al Capone reportedly owned one. But here is the brutal irony hiding underneath all that glamour. Every Model J was a money pit to produce. The tooling, the hand-fitted components, the custom coachwork coordination, none of it scaled, and none of it was cheap. Duesenberg was already leaning on the deep pockets of its parent company, Ford Corporation, just to keep the lights on. Then the Great Depression hit in 1929, and the market for $20,000 automobiles evaporated almost overnight. Nobody was buying rolling sculptures when they were struggling to buy groceries. Duesenberg limped along, selling roughly 480 Model Js total across its production run, a number so small it would barely register as a rounding error for Cadillac in a single week. By 1937, the entire Ford empire, including Duesenberg, collapsed into bankruptcy. The car that was built to prove America could out-engineer Europe ended up being one of the most expensive lessons in automotive history, proof that you can build the greatest car on earth and still go bankrupt doing it. 2. The Ford 810 and 812. If Duesenberg was the halo, the Ford 810 was the technological gamble that was supposed to save the whole empire. Released in 1936, the Ford 810 looked like nothing else on American roads. No visible headlights sitting up top like usual. Instead, retractable headlights hidden in the front fenders, cranked open by hand from inside the car, decades before pop-up headlights became a design trend anywhere else. There was no external hood ornament breaking up the smooth coffin nose front end. The body lines were so radical that the Museum of Modern Art in New York later added a Ford 810 to its permanent design collection, an honor almost no American production car has ever received. But the real gamble was under the skin. The Ford 810 was front-wheel drive, at a time when virtually every American car on the road was rear-wheel drive. This was not a small tweak, it was a complete re-engineering of how power reached the ground, requiring an entirely new transmission design that frankly was not ready for prime time. Early production units suffered constant transmission failures, cars getting stuck in gear, customers stranded on the side of the road in a car that cost more than double a standard Ford. Ford rushed the 810 to market for the 1936 New York Auto Show, promising deliveries that the factory could not actually meet, and the backlog of unbuilt orders combined with the reputation damage from failing transmissions created a wound the company could never fully close. Layer on top of that supercharged versions like the 812 that pushed performance even further while multiplying the mechanical complexity and the cost of production even more. Cord Corporation, already supporting the money-losing Duesenberg brand, simply could not absorb the losses from a technologically brilliant but mechanically unreliable front-wheel drive experiment. Production ended in 1937, the same year Duesenberg died, taking down the entire Auburn Cord. Duesenberg empire in one single collapse. Today, surviving 810s and 812s sell for well over $100,000 at auction, celebrated as one of the most beautiful and innovative American cars ever built. But at the time, that innovation was a financial grenade with the pin already pulled. 3. The Tucker 48. Preston Tucker wanted to build the safest, most advanced car Detroit had ever seen, and in 1948 he actually did it. The Tucker 48 featured a rear-mounted engine, a padded dashboard decades before padded dashboards became mandatory safety equipment, a windshield designed to pop out on impact instead of shattering into the driver's face, and a third headlight mounted in the center of the nose that turned with the steering wheel to illuminate corners before anyone else on the road even considered the idea. Seatbelts were offered as an option at a time most manufacturers considered them an unnecessary insult to their customers. This was not marketing fluff. This was genuinely revolutionary engineering, years, sometimes decades, ahead of the rest of the industry. But building a brand new car company from scratch, with brand new engineering, in post-war America, required an almost impossible amount of capital, and Tucker did not have the deep pockets of General Motors or Ford behind him. To fund production, he sold accessories and dealership franchises before cars were even rolling off the line, which caught the attention of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Whether it was the big three automakers feeling threatened, aggressive regulators, or a mix of both, Tucker found himself facing federal charges of stock fraud in 1950. He was eventually acquitted on every single charge, but the damage was already done. The legal battle strangled the company's cash flow and destroyed investor confidence at the exact moment Tucker needed both the most. Only 51 Tucker 48s were ever built before the company collapsed entirely. Today, those 51 surviving cars are treated like automotive royalty, displayed in museums, insured for millions of dollars, and immortalized in a Hollywood film simply because Preston Tucker refused to build anything less than the safest car he could imagine, and the industry made him pay for that ambition with everything he had. 4. The Chrysler Airflow. In 1934, Chrysler did something almost nobody else was doing. They actually used a wind tunnel. Engineers studied aerodynamics scientifically before designing the body of the Airflow, resulting in a shape that was measurably more efficient than anything else on American roads. The unibody construction was stronger and lighter than traditional body-on-frame designs. The engine was moved forward over the front axle for better weight distribution, improving both ride quality and handling in a way competitors simply could not match. On paper, and in a wind tunnel, the Airflow was a masterpiece of applied physics. On a car lot, it was a disaster because it looked completely unlike anything American buyers were used to, with a rounded, almost bulbous front end that customers found genuinely strange rather than futuristic. Early production models also suffered from structural issues after rushed manufacturing, and a rumor spread that an early Airflow prototype had literally rolled off a cliff during testing and kept running. A story that should have been a triumph of engineering, but instead scared buyers into thinking the car was unsafe. Sales collapsed. Chrysler had bet heavily on the Airflow as the future of the entire lineup, tooling up multiple factories for its production. And when the public rejected the design, the company was left holding enormous unsold inventory and wasted tooling costs. Chrysler survived, but only by retreating hard back to conservative, conventional styling for years afterward. It remains one of the most textbook examples in automotive history of a car being scientifically correct and commercially catastrophic at the exact same time. Now, before we move to number 5, here is something you need to sit with for a second, because it changes how you should be watching the rest of this list. Every single company on this countdown had the exact same warning sign appear right before it collapsed, a warning that almost nobody inside these companies took seriously at the time. Sales numbers on the flagship car would look fine, sometimes even record-breaking, right up until the month everything fell apart. Duesenberg had waiting lists. Cord had a packed order book at the New York Auto Show. Tucker had thousands of dealership deposits sitting in the bank. These were not failing products in the eyes of the people running them. They looked, on paper, like success stories, which means the actual killer here was never the car itself. It was the gap between what the car cost to build with zero compromise and what the company had left in reserve to survive even a single bad quarter. Keep that idea in your head, because the final 3 cars on this list take that exact same gap and stretch it to an almost absurd extreme, and the very last one on this countdown might be the most heartbreaking example of brilliant engineering destroying its own creator in the entire history of the automobile. 5. The Cadillac V16. In 1930, also tripped, right as the Great Depression was tightening its grip on America, Cadillac released a car powered by an engine with 16 cylinders, a number so extreme that most competitors were still perfectly happy with 8. The V16 engine was engineered to be whisper quiet, producing 165 horsepower with a smoothness that customers described as almost eerie, like the car was gliding rather than driving. Each engine bay was finished to a standard closer to jewelry than machinery, with polished and enameled components visible under the hood specifically because Cadillac wanted owners to open the hood and be impressed. Bodies were built in dozens of custom configurations through Fleetwood, allowing wealthy customers to essentially commission their own personal masterpiece. It was, without exaggeration, one of the most technically impressive engines ever installed in a production car up to that point in history, and it launched at the single worst possible moment in 20th century economic history. The stock market had crashed less than a year earlier, banks were failing across the country, and Cadillac was asking buyers to spend a small fortune on the ultimate symbol of excess during the years when displaying wealth openly had become almost socially dangerous. Sales for the V16 never came close to matching the ambition or the engineering investment poured into it. General Motors absorbed the losses because it had the scale to survive the mistake, something none of the independent manufacturers on this list ever had the luxury of doing. The V16 became a permanent reminder that timing can undo even the most brilliant engineering achievement in automotive history, and that building the most powerful car in the world means very little if nobody can afford to buy it. 6. The DeLorean DMC-12. John DeLorean left a powerful executive position at General Motors with one obsessive goal: to build his own car, a car so good it would prove he did not need Detroit's old rulebook to succeed. The DMC-12 arrived with brushed stainless steel body panels that would never rust or need painting, a design penned by the legendary Giorgetto Giugiaro, and dramatic gull-wing doors that opened straight up instead of outward, instantly making it one of the most visually striking cars anyone had ever seen on a public road. Every single design decision was built around making a statement rather than cutting corners. But building a completely new factory in Northern Ireland, engineering brand new manufacturing processes for uncoated stainless steel body panels, and developing a car from a blank sheet of paper with no existing platform to lean on required staggering amounts of capital, most of it funded through complicated government-backed loans tied to Northern Ireland's economic development goals. Production delays piled up. Quality control problems piled up right alongside them, and the price tag climbed well past what the market was actually willing to pay for a car with a comparatively underwhelming engine hidden behind all that stunning bodywork. By 1982, the company was drowning in debt, and DeLorean himself was arrested in an FBI sting operation involving alleged drug trafficking, charges tied directly to his desperate attempt to save the company from financial collapse. He was later acquitted, but by then the DMC-12 story had already become inseparable from scandal rather than engineering triumph. Only about 9,000 DMC-12s were ever built before the company folded entirely, and the car would have been a historical footnote if not for one single film franchise that turned it into cultural immortality. Immortality that John DeLorean himself never got to fully enjoy because the company that built his dream car was already gone by the time the world truly fell in love with it. 7. The Bugatti Type 41 Royale. If every car on this list represents ambition, the Type 41 Royale represents ambition taken to a level that borders on delusion, in the most fascinating way possible. Ettore Bugatti wanted to build a car for royalty, quite literally, a car so enormous and so extravagant that only kings, emperors, and heads of state would even be able to consider owning one. The Royale stretched over 21 feet long, powered by a massive 12.7-liter straight-8 engine, originally designed for aircraft use before Bugatti adapted it for the road. The wheelbase alone was longer than an entire modern compact car. Bugatti planned to build 25 of these rolling palaces, confident that European aristocracy would line up to buy them. Then the Great Depression arrived and effectively wiped out the exact customer base the Royale depended on. Wealthy European elites suddenly far less eager to display extravagant new purchases while economies collapsed around them. Bugatti ended up building only 6 Royales in total, and shockingly, only 3 of those 6 were ever actually sold to customers during the car's production life. The rest sat unsold, monuments to a level of ambition the real world simply was not ready to fund. The financial losses from the Royale program strained Bugatti's finances for years afterward, contributing to instability that the company never fully recovered from before. Ettore Bugatti's death and the eventual collapse of the original Bugatti company decades later. Today, the handful of surviving Royales are considered among the most valuable automobiles ever built, one selling privately for a price estimated well over $10 million. Proof that the car was never too ambitious for history to admire, it was simply too ambitious for its own moment in time to survive. 8. The Studebaker Avanti. By the early 1960s, Studebaker was already a company running out of time, watching sales slip year after year against the overwhelming marketing and manufacturing power of the Big Three. In a desperate final swing, Studebaker commissioned legendary designer Raymond Loewy to create something completely unlike anything else in the American market, and the result was the Avanti, a fiberglass-bodied coupe with a shape so radical it still looks futuristic today, more than 60 years later. The Avanti featured disc brakes as standard equipment, an almost unheard-of safety feature for an American production car at the time, along with a supercharged engine option that made it genuinely one of the fastest American cars you could buy in 1963. Studebaker even set land speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats specifically to prove the Avanti's performance credentials to a skeptical public. Critics praised it. Enthusiasts praised it. It should have been the car that saved the entire company. Instead, the fiberglass body panels proved incredibly difficult to manufacture consistently at scale, causing constant production bottlenecks and delivery delays that frustrated dealers and customers at the exact moment Studebaker desperately needed smooth, confident momentum. Every delayed delivery chipped away at confidence in a brand that was already fighting for survival, and the manufacturing costs of the Avanti's advanced design ate directly into a company that had almost no financial cushion left to absorb mistakes. Studebaker closed its main American factory in December of 1963, just 1 year after the Avanti launched, and shut down all domestic production entirely by 1966. The car built to prove Studebaker still belonged among America's great automakers ended up being one of the very last cars it ever built before disappearing from the industry for good. Look at the pattern sitting underneath every single one of these 8 stories. Duesenberg built the greatest engineering achievement in America and went bankrupt within a decade. Cord bet everything on front-wheel drive innovation and collapsed the same year. Tucker engineered the safest car in the world and got buried by lawsuits before he could prove it. Chrysler literally used science to build a better car and watched customers reject it on sight. Cadillac built the smoothest, most powerful engine of its era and launched it into the one moment in history nobody could afford it. DeLorean chased a design so bold it became a cultural icon, while the man who built it went bankrupt and got arrested trying to save it. Bugatti built a car fit for kings and discovered that kings, apparently, were not buying in the 1930s, and Studebaker used its final years to build arguably its best car ever, only to have that same ambition accelerate its own extinction. None of these companies died because they built something cheap or lazy or careless. They died because they refused to compromise, because they chased a version of automotive excellence that the market, the economy, or their own production capabilities simply could not sustain. And here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Every single one of these cars is worshipped today. Collectors chase them, museums display them, auction houses fight over them. The very excellence that bankrupted these companies is exactly why we still remember these cars almost a century later, while dozens of perfectly reliable, perfectly profitable, perfectly forgettable cars from the same era have vanished from memory entirely. So maybe the real question is not why these cars failed. Maybe the real question is whether building something that good was ever actually a failure at all, or whether history simply took a little longer than the shareholders were willing to wait. Every accountant who shut down these production lines was technically right in the moment. The losses were real, the debts were real, the bankruptcies were real. But every single one of them was also wrong about the thing that actually mattered, because none of them were measuring the one currency that turned out to matter most in the long run, which is memory. Nobody names their dream car after a company that played it safe. They name it after the ones that didn't. Which one of these do you think deserved to survive the most? The Tucker 48 with its safety innovations decades ahead of its time, or the Duesenberg Model J that basically invented the idea of an American supercar? Drop your answer in the comments below, and if you want more deep dives into the cars that were simply too good for their own time, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next one.